Hello, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to you all. Welcome to our Q&A.
Yeah, welcome to our regular Two Mats Q&A podcast brought to you by the New European newspaper. First question from Steve Lunn. I'm a UK expat living in France. My question is very simple. Do you think Brexit has done more damage to the UK or to the Conservative Party? What do you think, Matt?
Well, I don't care whether it's done any damage to the Conservative Party. I mean, it has done a lot of damage because it's shown that they have allowed themselves to be gripped by basically a crazed religious cult, which is what Brexit is. But it's done and is doing, and I fear for a while will continue to do, a lot of damage to the UK, and that's my position. You know, if parties can choose to do what they want, the problem is the rest of us then have to live with the consequences. And
it's curious, isn't it? I mean, you can think of many policy decisions over the last century that have been awful, but they've always had some sort of mitigation. Some will say, yes, but. But I can't, there's no yes, but about Brexit. It's just shit.
It is, and it's, it's at exactly the moment, because of the fact that America, under Democrat or Republican, is undoubtedly withdrawing from the world a bit. You know, we need a strong Europe, and the EU needs Britain with its money and its arms and weapons and diplomacy and security skills and everything else. Culture needs to be part of the EU. So in terms of, you know, historical timing, it was a doozy of a fuck up. Yeah,
I mean, one direct answer to Steve's excellent question is that the Conservative Party deserves the damage it has
it's
inflicted
entirely
on it, but the UK doesn't, because it was conned by con artists.
Yes, I mean, exactly. I mean, I don't. I mean, you know, I always want to see two sane parties at the centre of politics, but I don't think the Conservative Party shows any sign of going mainstream anytime soon. So.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. If you're looking for Brexit fans, you've come to the wrong podcast, folks.
To the wrong podcast.
Yeah. Next question, please.
I wonder whether either of you have seen the new Portrait of the King. I'm not a royalist, but as an artist, I looked at it with interest. It's been much criticised for being awash with red. However, I wonder whether we should look at it with new eyes, given the joyous news that we are finally to have an election. Could this indicate a sneaky, kingly admiration for Labour? After all, even the weather hates Sunak. From Adrienne. Thank you.
I love this question.
It's a good question, isn't it?
It hadn't occurred to me.
Me neither.
And it's very odd, the choice of red, because you would think naturally if you were going to sort of wash a picture of King Charles III with any colour, it would be green, wouldn't it? Because of his
because the environmental.
And then, so when I read Adrienne's question, I was also reminded of the time that his mother showed up at the state opening.
In EU colours.
In EU colours, with a hat. That couldn't be more like the EU flag if it was an EU flag.
Yes.
And yes, of course, was diplomatically denied by Buckingham Palace. Just a coincidence that it was
absolutely
a blue flag with yellow stars all over
Well,
it.
what is certainly true on these things, and I think it was definitely true of the Queen, the late Queen's outfit.
Yes.
Is that nothing happens by accident.
Yeah.
In that sort of thing. I mean, the Royals have made all sorts of mistakes, and we've talked about it. But Jonathan Yeo did the portrait.
Yeah.
It does talk with his subjects before, and he would certainly, in this case, have done so. So he won't. It won't have been the first time the king realised that it was. And I think it began before. When he was still the Prince of Wales, so a lot of thought went into it.
Can you make it a bit more Marxist, Johnny?
I'm wondering if you could possibly sew it clear to make it just a little bit more Leninist, sense of Mao about it. I mean, because the one thing that one can, it is red. I mean, it makes Francis Bacon look kind of, whoa.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Yeah, no, it's a very cheering theory, that.
Adrienne, thank you so much for your question. Love it. Next question from Mark Atkinson from Norfolk. Why would anyone other than the rich or the racist... Okay, I'm reading this question out, but I think we might have to dissect it a little bit. But why would anyone other than the rich or the racist vote Tory? What do they think they've got out of it so far? Why can't they see that they've been conned for years? Please enlighten me by explaining, if you can, how could it possibly be genuinely in the best interests of someone who was neither racist, rich or crackers to vote Tory?
Well, it's a stumper, isn't it? Because, I mean, actually, I was trying to think. I mean, if you think the NHS is just for scroungers and should be abolished... if you think sewage is good for the rivers, if you like Tory sleaze, nothing quite like it. No one does it better. But it's a serious question, and I think that look, I mean, it looks like we're headed for a massive Tory defeat. So the question kind of answers itself.
Yeah.
But the reason that people voted Tory in the past was to do with the kind of inherited idea that the Tory party was the party of economic competence. Well, that's gone. Liz Truss, thank you very much. That the Tory party was the party of public standards. That was already seriously doubted, but I think Partygate sorted that.
Absolutely, yeah.
The Tory party was the party of the rule of law. Well, proroguing Parliament unlawfully, that's gone. The party was the party of the Church of England. Well, they spend all their time now being rude about bishops as lefties.
Yeah.
The party was the party of the monarchy. Well, they lied to the Queen about prorogation of Parliament. I mean, the truth is that one of the things that Boris Johnson did was he actually one by one went, it kicked away all the old school reasons that folk over the generations had voted Conservative.
Yeah.
And I genuinely, and this is not a partisan point, I mean, I genuinely can't see, if you look down the old list of why people voted Tory, other than the ones that Mark mentions, I don't see any.
I'd answer it by saying that I don't think everyone who votes Tory is either rich or racist.
No.
But what I do think is that all rich, racist people vote Tory. So
yes, yeah. And look, a lot of people in this election will still vote Tory because, to an extent that, journalists and pollsters don't like to admit, a lot of voting is habit and family tradition, and it's a lot less than it used to be, but it is still, we're a Tory family, we're a Labour family, you must be joking, I'd never vote, So there will be lots of people who will just vote Tory in the way that they choose a beer, or that they like, this is their favourite kind of tea or whatever, and you have to accept that in a democracy, and it's true, and it's always true, but the world is so much more divisive and polarized than it was, that I think that kind of slightly sort of instinctive tribalism is on the wane.
It's the same unfathomable logic that procures the Daily Mail so many newspaper sales every day. It's habit and a kind of instinct, and of course it's self-perpetuating, because you are sitting here reading all this nationalistic tosh, and you start to believe it, and it inculcates into your psyche.
Yes, it's when it stops
end up voting Tory.
It stops being a custom and it becomes a belief.
Yes.
And I don't know where the line lies, but I think what I do think is that all that is changing very, very quickly.
Do you know what would be
not
great,
necessarily
Matt?
For the better.
Would be like an app that asked you 100 different questions and computed what you should vote for your own self-interest.
I think there are websites where you can sort of say, well, what do you think on gay marriage, the environment, the rule of law, whatever, and they're very useful, and they can also tell you who to vote for in your constituency, which is the crucial thing, because it's not always, because of first past the post, sometimes it's wise to vote tactically. Right. But it's actually a good question.
It is a very good question. Thank you, Mark Atkinson from Norfolk. Next question, please.
Rishi Sunak's national service plan is obviously bonkers. Agreed. But with America withdrawing step by step from the international stage, especially if Trump wins, is there a case for training more UK reservists of all ages? Sean from Bristol.
Well, I was shocked by how small the British Army actually is. The fact you can fit them all into the Emirates Stadium. I think there's sub 60,000 in the army. And also the state of our national defence equipment, the fact that we've got one serviceable aircraft carrier, have we? That our nuclear deterrent is aging and needs reconsidering. The submarines are, in a shambolic state. And the flip side to all of this is that we're constantly being told that, oh no, there's new types of warfare coming down the road. We've got cyber war and all of this stuff. And yet what's happening in Ukraine demonstrates that there's a very old 20th century style of war playing out. Literally people in trenches, fighting a very old-fashioned style of war. And you do wonder how can Britain feel secure with such a small force? Obviously, we're part of NATO, but NATO is...
Well, it's interesting that, because on that very point, I was at the Hay Festival last week, and I interviewed an absolutely brilliant guy called Peter Apps, who's written a history of NATO, and he's also an army reservist himself, or officer, and he works quite a lot of the time, in Whitehall for the defence side of things. And his point about sort of the scale of the army is that obviously the Sunak plan is a non-starter, partly because the MOD didn't know anything about it on the Thursday before it was announced. So it was obviously just drawn
up on the spot,
on back of an envelope by special advisors. I mean, it's not. It doesn't even. It shouldn't be dignified with detailed analysis.
Yeah.
But that because of exactly what you just said about Ukraine and the fact that warfare is changing and there are drones and AI and cyber warfare, but there is still conventional warfare, and America is withdrawing from the stage, that European countries are going to have more people who are capable of taking part in not just actual combat but exercises, and so I think Sean's point about of all ages is kind of the most important bit in that question, which is actually it should be it should be possible for people to go off and do some training, and not necessarily in infantry training, but to be part of service provision and in a reserve role if necessary. And that can now be it shouldn't just be 18-year-olds actually.
Well, I've never got this. Like, I'm 55. But I'd fancy my chances against most 18-year-olds that I'd meet. So why am I prohibited from stepping in?
Why indeed? I mean, there are only 27,000. I looked up this morning. There's only 27,000 reservists in this country, which is nothing, right? Yeah. And I think there's a really good case for this. And again, to quote Peter Apps, he said, if you're looking for an incentive, because some people, an incentive is never a bad idea, especially for younger people, and I don't mean 18-year-olds, I mean people in their 20s who, go off and do 6 months of trainings, give them lower mortgage rates or offer to help pay off their student debt.
Yes.
And then crucially, and this is a point I hadn't thought of as not being an expert, you have people who can train, who can be called back to train the next generation.
Yes, yeah.
And so everyone thinks about national service in terms of sending their 18-year-old children off to the front. No, this is a much more subtle and complex and multi-layered thing, which is about how we prepare for this very, very multi-dimensional new geopolitical world. And sorry to say it, but yet again, it really would be very good if we were in the EU, because these sort of things are so much better planned.
Totally.
On a multinational level,
and it's a place where we could legitimately take a lead, isn't it?
And we could, and I actually think that even outside the EU, in the next coming years, this will happen. Not necessarily the reservist point, but much greater European cooperation. I think David Lammy, the likely next Foreign Secretary, is hard at work on that.
Yeah, brilliant.
So it's a good question.
Sean, thank you for that question. Have we got time for another question? Yes, we have one more winging its way.
Right. From Digby 47, or 4Z, sorry, Digby 4Z in Streatham. My wife tells me that she can't wait for me to be replaced by AI. I'm sorry, Digby. First of all, a moment of silence for Digby. And it may never happen. Is there anything or anyone the two Matts are looking forward to being replaced by robots or computers?
Oh my gosh.
Oddly enough, this is not... this is sort of one technology being replaced by another, which is one of the things that makes me want to, really go postal, is chatbots. Right? You want to do something absolutely basic.
Yeah.
Okay? And it says, hold on, I'm just getting, on your screen, and a little bubble appears with a fake name. Yeah. And it is something of such simplicity that there should just be a click button.
Yeah.
But you then have to engage in a pretend conversation with... So what I want, I want HAL 9000 from 2001 to say, no, Matt, I can't let you do that, or I can let you do that. Yeah. But real AI, because the thing about AI, and my younger son was saying this to me the other day, actually, is that what'll probably happen is it won't be the Terminator. It'll just be really shitty tech, right? that drives us all mad, right? And businesses will say, "Hey, it's AI," right? Yeah. And but what my plea, what I beg these corporations that are all doing seminars and thinkings about AI is, can it be intelligent?
Yeah,
that's all I ask.
I think. Oh, so we did a cover about. Nearly a year ago, I think now, and the question framed on the cover was, well, what if AI actually saves the planet?
Yes.
And a lot of people said, well, you're talking about it saving humanity. The planet's going to be fine, but it's humanity that needs saving, and that's a fair point. But so to answer Digby4Z's, sounds like an AI construction.
That's what I thought.
Is this the first AI question about AI?
Yeah, and are we about to be replaced by the two Matt Zeros?
But if there was any one thing you could say, well, target all that computing power at something, it would surely be medical, wouldn't it? It would be like
yes.
Can you cure cancer?
Yes.
Can you work your way through the cancers and find out by this extraordinarily exponential leap in computing power how to defeat cancer? Yeah. Wouldn't that be a marvelous thing?
Well, interestingly, a lot of oncologists are now describing themselves as algorithmists.
Really?
Yes, because so much of their work now, this is in the research line of things, but so much of their work is now dedicated to using AI to analyze individual tumors and build treatment protocols based on it,
right.
That they consider themselves more algorithmists and tech people than they are medical people. So I think,
almost on a person by person, a patient
by patient
basis.
That is definitely coming down the track.
Amazing.
I mean, that is just that's years away.
Yeah.
I mean, one doesn't want to tempt fate, but if what seems to be happening continues to happen, cancer will be a chronic, at worst, condition within the next 10 years.
Amazing.
I mean, you never know, because you never know. I mean, the crucial thing is, where is research money and where are people who can do this being ploughed, Because don't forget, Richard Nixon said, I want cancer to be a thing of the past by the end of my presidency. It didn't work out so well.
He only gave himself 6 weeks.
But a lot of people have promised the end of cancer.
Yeah.
But I think we are in sight of it.
There was an amazing conversation on, when would it have been? Midweek on Radio 4 in the afternoon, one of those afternoon shows they do. And they were talking about medical science and AI and how, and I'd never thought about it this way, but how all of medical science is basically snapshot analysis. You go in, you have a blood test, they ask you your weight, your blood pressure, but it's of that moment. And the doctor was saying, well, imagine a world where your health is being monitored all the time, your whole life. So it's not a snapshot every time you feel something might be up.
No, it's constant.
Constant evaluation and constant awareness of potential disharmony of the body coming down the tracks.
Yes, and I think that will be the answer to the question, how are we going to fund the NHS in the end?
Yes.
Which is that we will all, through whatever device is the next device, be constantly being told by AI what's gone wrong in our nutrition, we're not doing enough exercise, or we're doing the wrong kind of exercise. Here's what you should do. I mean, we'll all have a personal coach.
So I've got a friend who went into hospital feeling ill. I mean, this, I guess, is a very common story, really. Yeah. Feeling exhausted and was opened up, had heart surgery the next day or 2 days later, and said the artery into his heart was, 75% clogged.
Wow.
Now, so that's something one assumes with constant measurement to be a way of, so almost like maybe AI can take care of diagnosis, and the NHS becomes treatment,
because that's the seems to me the right way, because I think people, in spite of what some tech people think, I think there will always be part of the human condition that wants human to human contact, especially in things like medicine. But what an interesting prospect is okay, so you're having an operation and the lead surgeon is a human being, but the junior is a machine, right? Now that is cost effective and already happening in some places.
Yeah.
But the point that is being made by the medical profession is, it works in terms of the operation, but what it means is who's training the future lead surgeon.
Right.
Because the junior surgeon in the operation is there to learn to be the lead.
Yes.
And so the mix and match of AI and carbon-based life forms is going to be very complicated. But on medicine, I am optimistic about AI.
Yeah. Good. I'm optimistic about it in many ways. I'm not pessimistic about it in journalism, I have to say, because I know, Matt, that you are simply irreplaceable.
Well, I could say the same of you, and it would be true.
And you can.
It would be true. And we're going to take the Turing test afterwards to show that.
So
you've all seen Blade Runner. We are not replicants.
We are not. And if you want to read our original human-created content every week, you can get it from the New European by subscribing.
Human created at the moment.
Human created du jour, and you can get you can get a wonderful curation of human created content by subscribing to the New European at theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats.
Good name for a robot, TNE 1000, isn't it?
TNE 1000. Brilliant. I love that. Right. That's
Have a great day.
Now. Have a wonderful Sunday.
Have a wonderful Sunday.
Great.